Hello, and welcome to the updated Genshin guide. So, just for a quick clarification, it is the updated version of the first ever Genshin guide I did, which covered all the general basics of the game I could really think of. However, a few things. First of all, that was, I think, almost 2 years ago at this point, and because of that, not only was some of the actual stuff mentioned outdated, but I feel like as well, just my knowledge of the game and even just the editing back then, and also my voice probably wasn't as good. That being said though, I will probably still repeat a bunch of the stuff previously mentioned. And before we get any further, I should also mention a few things. First of all, I will try and avoid every kind of spoiler I can imagine. Something else I also kind of failed to do in the first guide. But this time round, I'm going to try and keep it to even just the First Nations, and also try and avoid showing any characters that you don't get at the beginning of the game. There may very well be some things that have a spoiler to it in some sense, because maybe you don't get it at the very beginning of the game, but maybe it's something that's kind of relevant to playing the game in general. For example, the Spiral Abyss. I should also mention that, as shown by the fact I'm making this updated guide, some of the stuff mentioned in this could very well end up outdated a few years ahead from now. And with all of that being said, let's get into it. So first of all, we can go as far as saying the server you make the account on. Now the reason why I say this is because when you make an account and you choose the server, that account is strictly locked to that server. So if you use the same account but change the server that you're on, it'll be like you're starting from scratch again. So for example, I'm on the Europe servers. With the same login and everything I've got, if I decided to go to America servers, I'd be at the beginning again, and I'd have to go back to the Europe server to be back on my regular account. I believe this also applies to any kind of co-op feature. So for those who don't know, you can actually play with other people, but I'm pretty sure you have to be on the same server as well. So do keep things like this in mind if you haven't made an account yet. Next up, I suppose we can just say about very basic stuff like the menu. If you're on PC like I am, you can hold down the left Alt button and the cursor appears when you move the mouse. So you can actually just click on any icon here at the top. Up at top right, you can change a whole bunch of stuff. Overall, it's kind of just decoration stuff, I suppose you could say, like change avatar. It literally just changes the profile picture of your character here. It also says what your adventure rank is, so 60 is the highest. I did also make a video in the past of how to reach, I think it was adventure rank 18 fairly quickly. So if you're stuck at those kind of ranks and you want to get a quick rank up, then feel free to watch that video. It might feel a bit outdated to watch now, but the general advice shown and just anything in that video is probably still quite accurate now. The world level, it says here, world level 9 is the highest you can get, and that basically just means what kind of difficulty it's at, what kind of level the enemies are in the world. That goes up depending on your adventure rank. There's then a few things on the side here, like taking a photo. Again, it's just like things you can do for fun. The mail can be quite important because you can get a bunch of stuff for free. For example, right now, there's actually the anniversary, I believe the 5th anniversary of the game. So they've actually been sending out a bunch of stuff each day as a little reward. Now for shop, that's more or less just the stuff you'd actually spend money on. So if you're free to play, you probably won't really go to it. Apart from the Paimon's bargains down here. So every currency in this is the Master of Star Glitter from this page. If I can remember what it's called, Master of Stardust, there we go, to get anything from this. And then this is how you get wishes with Primogems, which I'll get into later as well. And also don't worry, it'll be explained later on what things like this mean. Now, party setup, you can only have 4 characters in a team, so this is where you change what characters are in your current team. You can also go to team bonus at the top here. Used to say elemental resonance, but there's something recent that changed, so there's something else that can appear there. based on who's in your team, but usually all you'd see is this page. And to put it simply, every character in the game has a certain element that they're part of. So I imagine you might be able to work out just from the symbols that this, for example, would be fire, this is wind, this is like an electric one, that would be ice. The official names being pyro, animo, electro, cryo. The other three are dendro, geo, and hydro, with that being grass, earth, I suppose, and then water. Point of this page is to show what elemental types of the characters you have in the party are. So if we look at what I've got Traveller, who's currently Animo, Amber, who's Pyro, Kai, who's Cryo, and Lisa, who's Electro. Because they're all different elements, they have this buff, meaning they take less damage against any, well, I guess you could say elemental damage, and also against physical damage, which would be just a hit by a sword or something, or maybe by an arrow. Just anything that isn't infused with an element, I guess. And then all of the other ones you see here are what you get from having two people of the same element in your party. And in some cases it is actually very good, like Pyro here for example, you get 25% increase in attack for all your party members. Things like archives here, it's literally just so you can look at things you've got. Character archive, you can look at every playable character in the game. And then character here, which lets you see all of the stats of your characters. Don't worry, I'll explain what everything you're looking at means later on. And then you've also got training guide, which I think is very useful for a new player, of course. So here it would show every member of your team right now. And it also, makes it very clear on who your weakest link is at the moment. And if you go over to enhance, let's say Amber here, it would show you which are the weak points of them right now. So right now, for example, they're not as leveled up as they could be. Their weapon isn't that strong. Haven't leveled up character talents, which is something I'll go into later. The only good thing right now is the artifacts. Do bear in mind though, there are kind of other things this game doesn't necessarily consider for saying that this character's strong or not. But it is quite a good way of saying what you need to work on at least. The Adventure Handbook, if we go to the experience at the top, these little challenges, they're just something to do as you're playing the game. Same with in battle. For guide, this can kind of tell you what kind of quests you need to do next to progress into whatever. So that could be a good thing to do if you're a bit lost. And for enemies, basically every type of enemy in this game tends to drop a certain material that you might need in order to level something up. So going on something like this can let you track where the enemies are, because it will show you where they are on the map. There are a few different types of domains. Basically just think of it as something you go to get rewards to level stuff up. Commissions, they're arguably the most important part of this entire thing for most people. You can simply think of them as just daily quests. Now, there's a few things on here. So first of all, the regular way, and I think this is the case for up to Adventure Rank 45, I want to say. Correction, it's Adventure Rank 24. I've no idea where I got 45 from. The only way you can really do the dailies is by actually just doing them. So if I went on another account of mine for a second, it's quite an easy way I can show this. So on this account, I think I left it till this one last commission. Indeed I have. So it says 3 out of 4 at the top there, because I have just one last one to do left. Now there's something interesting about this specific commission. And you will see this quite a few times, especially in Mondstadt, where you have to destroy these towers. Now I will just say this because you can ignore the enemies while it's all going on. If I just do this... Okay, this might take a while. Bit awkward to do with just one character. But in a second... That's one tower destroyed. Almost there. There we go. So commission done. Now if I go to the commissions at the top... There's a bunch of exclamation marks. So we go over to the Adventurers Guild. Talk to Catherine here. And you can also claim this for doing all 4 of your dailies. There's one big reason why people do that every day. There's a few other reasons now, I'd say. But I think the main reason is for the Primogems. To put it simply, to get characters. Also, just another thing is, as you can see here, expeditions. Basically, you can put characters on these things and then, send them away for a certain amount of time to get rewards. Something I'm pretty sure I thought when I started was that you'd lose those characters for that time, that you couldn't use them. But no, don't worry about which characters you're putting on the expeditions or anything. I personally would recommend these kind of ones, so where you can get these ores. And also, if you feel like it, ones where you can get Mora. Mora is used for a lot of things, mainly for leveling. And the ores you see here are used for weapons, so they're also very useful. Now, you may have noticed that if I go back to this, there's still something going on here. It says weekly progress completed after some ticks up here. And it also says about a resin consumption out of 120. So if I go to view details, there's this. So, I can't quite think off the top of my head whether I might be a bit late to saying this in a guide now. I'm sorry to say this might actually be a bit too late now. So if you start the game, you might actually miss out on the final reward. But something they brought out at the beginning of this update with their new anniversary is something you can get 3 of a year, I think it was. Basically, if you do all 4 dailies and use up 120 resin each day, again I'll say what resin is, you get a tick. Get 5 of those ticks in a week, so in other words do this for 5 days in a week, and you get one of these rewards each time, meaning that if you then do it for 8 weeks you get the final reward here. This final reward is actually a very good reason to keep this up. If you look down here where it says switch choice, there's a whole bunch of characters that are shown. Only a few of them are lit up, and it's because these are the characters that this account has. Now, if I go back to the character menu, if I go down to constellations here, on Traveler, they get constellations a bit differently because, of course, they're the character you have at the beginning of the game. But for every other character, you have to get them through wishing, which, if you're familiar with this term, it's like the gacha system of the game. Now, if you've already had that character, you get a constellation of them, which, as you may have started to guess, is the reward you see here. Meaning that if you have one of these characters, you can pick them to have a constellation for, and once you've done this for 8 weeks, you get a free constellation on the character. Now, the reason why this is also a big deal is because this is for 5-star characters. 5-star characters are the hardest ones to get. When people spend a whole bunch of money on this game, it's in order to get those 5-star characters. Now, here's another thing. I really hope this guide isn't too late for this. I'm pretty sure I'll just barely be able to say about this in time, so hopefully you see this in like the first week of this coming out. But under the events tab, so to find that, you can either open up the menu, click events over here, or if you see the icon at the top right, and I think this is available the second you can see the events at all, which is quite early on. It says invite character. I've already done it, but every character you see here is also a 5-star character, and this means you can pick one of them to keep permanently. And this is something that's also available every year as part of the game's anniversary. Now, I don't personally like the idea of telling you, oh, get this character because they're the best, and so on. But if you do just purely want the best character, I imagine everyone would tend to say Tainari out of these. Here's a quick rundown of every character though, and I'll say what they're mainly used for. They can sometimes be used for different things, but this is their main role. Jean is typically a healer. Diluc is like a main DPS. Chi-Chi is also a healer. Mona is usually like a support character. Keqing is a main DPS. Tainari is a main DPS. Dea is a support. And Mizuki is a DPS. So when I was saying DPS, I mean the character that you're typically using on the field to do the majority of the damage. When I say support characters, I'm talking about ones who you'd use their ability, but then you'd want to switch to a different character. And well, for healing, I'm sure that probably doesn't have to be explained. Also, just on another note, a few of these characters are from later nations, specifically these last 3. Because of that, the materials related to getting them stronger can be in those areas. So if that changes your decision, Jean, Diluc, Chi-Chi, Mona and Keqing are from Mondstadt and Liyue, which is basically just the beginner area. Anyway, hopefully that gave a rough idea if you're struggling to decide on a character. Now, with commissions, there's another thing. Specifically, I think it's Adventure Rank 24, which, as I explained with this whole commission stuff, I also slightly brought up this resin here, and this is all related to what you see down here where it says encounter points and these presents. So instead of having to do each of these daily quests, you can instead skip them by using up your resin. So if I open up the map, there's a few things at the top right here. What you see here for the 150 out of 200 is resin. You get 1 resin every 8 minutes. So I'm pretty sure it's something like 26 hours to get the full 200. Now if I go over to this crafting table, there's an easy way for me to just use up resin, and it's here. So this is condensed resin. Now to be able to do this, you need the recipe for this. I believe there's a new way to do it. Originally you had to do something with reputation in Leeway, which is something that kind of takes a while. I think if you talk to the blacksmith here and then ask to buy stuff, maybe it's here? It is. Ah, so you get all of this as well. That's really nice. So, okay. Before we go any further, I'd recommend getting this, because this is also very much related to condensed resin. The first two you see here, and, well, you can craft this into one as well. They're all gadgets, and gadgets are what you see in the bottom right. That little fan symbol, that's a gadget I have equipped right now. But if you go in the inventory, and then, what's that, the 6th tab, shows all your gadgets here. This is the crystal fly, as you just saw. This was something you could craft with, like, the formula stuff. And if I can find it, there it is. That's the other gadget that was just shown. And also, if you hold down the gadget button, there are 4 you can have as like a quick slot thing, so you can quickly switch between them without having to go in the inventory. This gadget, for example, if I'm gliding, I can glide, there we go. If I press the button, get this little wind current for a bit. Just like fairly niche things like that for fun. Now if we go back to crafting, to make these condensed resin, it now takes 60 resin. Used to be 40, but it means you can use them as if they're 60 resin, basically. So if I craft that, got 2 of them. So now I've actually used up 120 resin. So if I go back to my commissions, all of these are now circled, I guess you could say. If I click this, that's all the rewards as if I've just done all 4 of these commissions. If I go to view details as well, it's that whole thing I mentioned before, because today's also conveniently when I've gotten that reward on this account. And now that I've also claimed the thing down here, I can talk to Catherine again, claim the daily, and boom, there's the extra one for doing the 4. So to put it simply, 30 resin would be the equivalent of doing 1 daily quest. And considering that you want to use 120 each day for this, it's very convenient. And you may also notice it says long-term encounter points 106. I'm pretty sure you use up 1 point every one of these. So it'd be 4 points a day. So you can only do it if you have these points. Now the way to get them, basically just read the question mark here. Once you've done your dailies, anything that would give you points goes towards the long-term encounter points, which if we go up here, this is how you get encounter points usually. Basically it's from doing quests and exploration. That's the main way anyway. Now, the reason why I said earlier about that crystal fly trap gadget that you could get from the blacksmith here, if I go back down to the condensed resin, you'll notice there's another material that's needed to make them. Would you look at that? It's from the crystal fly trap. So the regular way you get crystal cores is by catching these crystal flies, as it says. The crystal fly trap, basically think of it as, I'm pretty sure it's 15 crystal cores that you can get a week. So you'd simply put it down and then you just wait a week and then you can go back to it to then get your crystal cores, put it down again a week later and so on. I think the materials you have to put in to activate it happen to be one of those ores I previously showed from doing those expeditions. Now, apart from talking about resin, I think there's only a couple of other things to really bring up for just very basic knowledge, I suppose. So first of all, with the co-op feature, it's up here, and also F2 on the keyboard if you play on PC. Shows a giant list here. These are people you can join. Every time you open it up, it changes the people shown here. You can also search for someone at the top here by their UID, which is what you see at the bottom right. Now, the reason why I'm showing this is just because I notice a lot of people not actually realizing about this feature. At the bottom left, world permissions. This affects whether people can actually join your world. So by default it's to join after approval, meaning there'll be this little pop-up that appears when someone requests to join you. If you accept it, they'll be in your world. You can have up to 4 people in the world, by the way, including yourself. There's allowed direct join. They can join you without any kind of warning. If you have reject join, you'll never see it ever again, so you can do that especially if you don't want to be disturbed. Just as a little note though, if you are new, I can almost guarantee the majority of people that join you are genuinely either there to collect materials from your world, or maybe they're just like bored and want to help you or something. I remember back when I was new, when people were requesting to join me, I was genuinely thinking they were just gonna start trash talking me for not having good characters or something, but no one's like that at all. So for resin, as I've shown, it's something you get every now and then. But as you can see, I've now got 2 condensed resin here. You can have 5 condensed resin at most, by the way. Now, there's a few ways to use resin. One of them is by fighting the bosses, which show up as an icon like this. You can also see them in the enemies, and then if you go on boss enemies, it just shows you the actual bosses. You can also do ley lines, which are these kind of symbols. So this one, for example, simply put, it's materials needed to level up your characters. There's also another type of ley line here, which mainly just gives you more. Do note as well that with many of these things, especially anything that costs you resin, you will also get the adventure XP I've shown, so that you can go up in adventure rank. The only reason why it's not shown for me is because I'm already at the highest. Instead, I get bonus Mora. There are also domains, so here for example, and as you can see, it does actually just say here that it costs resin, and depending on which one you pick, you get a certain type of reward. There are also a certain type called trance domains. I'm not going to get into them for this video because they are very much spoiler related, but this you see here, that's a trance domain. There are ones that look exactly the same, like this, and this. They're just a bunch of random stuff, to be honest. They're usually based on story stuff as well, but there's some specific ones like here, which are something completely different. To put it simply, we call them weekly bosses, because you can only get their rewards once a week, and they also drop certain materials that you might need for something. Again, you can also find them in the handbook, where if you go to domains, you then have trance domain there. There is a way you can do them early before having them unlocked. I think there's a quick start feature, but I don't think you can do that in co-op. And also, they are very much related to the story, so it would be a bit of a spoiler to do as well, to be honest. Especially when you're new, I can't think of a reason you would have to do them anyway. I don't think you need the materials until much later on. So when it comes to domains anyway, just these two, the weapon and the talent ascension materials. Artifacts, I think that's also something you kind of only want to do once you're around adventure rank 45, and that's just because you can only start getting these Would you look at that? Someone wants to join my world. But the thing is, when you're new, the artifacts that you see here won't be available in the lower difficulty domains, which is all you can do when you're a lower adventure rank. And the reason why you'd want to do these artifact domains is for the 2 sets you see at the top here. As for that general reason, I wouldn't recommend farming for artifacts at all when you're new. I think the most important thing in that regard is just either leveling characters or just using the right kind of characters for a good team. So when it comes to domains, I definitely recommend weapons or talent level up stuff. And to know which one to do, if I just go to a random weapon here, I mean I have to level it first, but normally when you ascend weapons it shows this kind of stuff that you need to do. These 2 materials you see here tend to be from regular enemies that you fight around the world. The first one you see here is what you get from a specific domain. So if you click here, and then there, shows you what domain to do. Now the other thing was talents. So on the 5th page of the character, there's a few things here. It's different for Traveller, but for most it would be 6. So the 4th and 5th one you see here are Ascension talents. To put it simply, that's from leveling them up enough. One at the very bottom, they have from the beginning, it's a passive talent that does a certain thing. Amber, for example, means you can glide for longer. First 3, typically the first 3 anyway, can be a bit different sometimes, are based on their actual attacks. So normal attack, for example Traveller, this would be normal attack, just hit him with the sword. This would be a charged attack as well, but that kind of goes under normal attack again with the talents. For Amber, this would be a normal attack. This would be a charged attack, where it goes up like that. And then the second one is their skill. So again, Traveller, it'd be this. Amber would be this, so on. And then the third one you see is their burst. In Amber's case, be that. It's just what you see at the very bottom right in the corner, where it's like that very glowy thing. So if we click on these ones, as you can see, it actually says about upgrading them. So you need certain materials to be able to do that. So I think overall that's kind of just the basics of the game and the kind of things you'd want to be doing on a daily basis. So just to run through very briefly again, ideally when you go on each day, go to Catherine, you'd want to do the expedition stuff. You also want to do your dailies, which if you're very new, do the quests. They will show up as purple symbols on the map. Can't show them on this account because they're off in another nation. And also if you open up the quest log, if you press J as well, they're the very top ones that appear. You can click navigate to show you where they are on the map. Once you've done those commissions, you can talk to Catherine, get that little bonus again for doing all 4. For an extra reward, try and get 120 resin spent each day, whether it's through using that condensed resin or by doing whatever. Also, something I forgot to mention with condensed resin is you can use it on anything else that costs resin typically, apart from anything related to a boss. In fact, I suppose you can use it on anything that normally costs 20 resin. So domains here says 20. Leyline says 20. If I go to a boss, it'll say 40. The trounce domains, which I said are weekly bosses, they cost 60 apart from the first 3 you do, which are 30 instead. What to use resin on when you're brand new, I'd recommend just weapon level materials, talent materials, or maybe just farming bosses for certain characters, even if you don't need it, but you might need it for like a future level up that you can get to later on. Hopefully that explained it all. Now there's a few other sections I have in mind for this video. I reckon the next one is probably what a lot of people actually care about the most. It's all about wishing. So on wish menus normally, these are the 4 things you'd see at the top. So these 3 things change, it's like every few weeks. These ones came out, I think, a couple days ago. So yeah. It would have just been 3 weeks or something that this is going to be out for. I think this one will probably be near the end by the time this video is out. The one at the end is always here, and this is what we call the standard banner. These are what we call event banners, or maybe limited time, whatever you want to call it. When you're very new, there's also another one. I think it's on the far left, and it goes after you do 20 wishes, I think. So, a way to just make sense of everything you're looking at here. On this banner, banners are what we call each of these. You see this cool looking guy here, Flint. He's a 5-star character. And then there's 3 here on the right. They're all 4-star characters. If I go on to the second one with Yelan, it actually has the same 4-star characters as you can see. That's because these 2 banners are, I suppose you could just say they're linked. So if I go to details down here, it shows you the featured characters on the banners. And also if you go to list of items, these are all the possible characters you can get in the entire banner. You can also get weapons, by the way, but just 4-star weapons. And 3 for that matter, of course. If you go to the middle one, the details, this is where it gets into the really complicated looking stuff. So this is how to put it into real simple terms. And I mean, this is what you actually need to look at. 5-star characters are guaranteed every 90 tries. So every 90 wishes you do, that's a 5-star, guaranteed. Likewise, you're guaranteed to get a 4-star every 10 wishes. So this could be a 4-star weapon, 4-star character, and if there's anything else in the future somehow, then yeah, sure, probably that as well. That's fairly simple, I think. 4-star every 10 wishes, 5-star every 90 wishes, unless you're lucky, of course. And then as you can see here, it says a weird 50% thing. So every time you get a 4-star from wishing on this banner, it's a 50% chance it's going to be one of these. The other 50% chance is literally any other 4-star in the entire game. So that could be anything on this list. If you get a 5-star, so that's every 90 wishes, it's a 50% chance that it's Flynn's here. If not, it's going to be one of these other 5-stars you see. You may have noticed, possibly from these names, that they are actually the same ones as the 3 selection I mentioned before. That's because these 5-stars are from the standard banner. So that is to say they don't have their own special limited time banner. They're always available on this. So if I go to details list of items, shows them all here. Alongside a few weapons as well, by the way. That being said though, unlike the 5-stars, if I look at the 4-stars, there's a lot of them here. And if we look at the event one again, we have Dory, Sucrose and Aino. Now it can be a bit different if the 4-stars are really new like Aino is, but for Sucrose and Dory, they'll be somewhere in this giant list. there's Dory. Okay, there's Sucrose. So the main thing I'm trying to get at here is that 4 stars, apart from when they're very new, are always available in the standard banner and technically in any other event banner, even if they're not featured. The 5 stars on these limited banners are only ever available through that way. That's the main thing I'm trying to get at here. Similar situation with the weapon banner. Slightly different, I know, but it's the same kind of idea. So I know it says different numbers here, it says like 75%, but that's because if we look here, it's from the fact that there's 2 event weapons. So if you want one of them specifically, I'm pretty sure it still goes down to a 50-50. The other different thing about the weapon banner is that you get a 5-star every 80 guaranteed, rather than a 90 from a character. And if I go to list of items, instead of the 5-star characters, of course, it's the 5-star standard weapons, the ones from that standard banner. And if I go into 4 stars, it indeed also has the 4-star characters. So the only real difference between the weapon banner and the regular character ones here is just between the 5-star rewards. Now, for anyone who's confused in the future about hearing the term pity, that's literally about the amount of times you wished since your last 5-star, basically. So if we go down to history, went on permanent, for example, I imagine this will take quite a while. Never mind, not too long, because it's been in 5s each page. That means it's been 20 wishes since the last 5-star. So that means on the standard banner right now, I'm on 20 pity. That's all it means. Now, there's one other thing very important about the whole wishing stuff. It's about the idea of a guaranteed 5-star. If we go back into details, should be able to see it somewhere. So basically, if you lost your 50-50, so let's say you're trying to get Flynn's, but instead you ended up getting D-Luke. That means the next time you get a 5-star, it's actually guaranteed to be Flynn's in this case. So to put it in the worst case scenario, you're actually guaranteed the 5-star character you want in 180 wishes. Another very nice thing about the wishing system is that between these 2 banners and the ones that it then goes into next time, so after 17-18 days, that pity that I mentioned before, and the count for whether you lost your last 50-50. Let's say, for example, you're on 50 pity, and you lost the last 50-50. Let's say you got D-Luke. So your next 5-star would be Flynn's, and he's like 40 wishes away. If instead you decided to go for Yelan, same exact count, you'd be guaranteed Yelan in 40 wishes. After 18 days, or however long it is, I'm not even sure what the next banner will be. In fact, wait, no, it's going to be next update, so yeah, I won't know. But whoever's in the next update, guaranteed to get them in 40 wishes. So that's the very nice thing about this character banner stuff. None of your wishes are lost in that sense. The weapon banner has its own pity, same with the standard banner for that matter as well. But the weapon banner has a slightly different system to what I was mentioning earlier. So you might notice this epitomized path. I think I said that correctly. So you pick one of these weapons and you can click chart course. When you've done that, it shows it down there in the bottom left. Now, when I was saying before about losing your 50-50, so let's say instead of this weapon, I got the bow, which is the other featured 5-star. This would go up to 1 out of 1. Or if I got a standard banner 5-star weapon. Next 5-star after this on the banner would be guaranteed to be that one. Do bear in mind though that this guarantee goes away if you cancel the course. As it says here, resets your fate points. So do be careful if you actually have one of those points. Standard banner has its own pity as well, as I said. And you may have also noticed that if I go back to here, there's a little rainbow symbol of the 9. If I go back here, blue with 0. So first of all, the big number here are the Primogems. 160 of these make the fate. These fates are used for the wishing. Cost a different type of fate to wish on the standard banner. I believe it's also this fate that you use on the beginner banner, the one that goes away after 20 wishes. So if we go down to shop in the bottom left, showed this earlier, but as you can see here, I'd never recommend getting the blue fate, and I think it was quite clear why. Literally every character in this is also in this. There's no good reason to use up your Primogems on it. Now, when you get things from the wishing, you could also get these 2 things at the top. I can't remember exactly how much you get from stuff, but I'm pretty sure you only get these when it's a 4-star or above, and then this from anything. I could be wrong though. With this stuff, it always resets every month, and well, if I go down to the bottom, normally these are at the top if you have them available. You can get 5 of them each month. So as long as you have 375 of these each month, that's another 5 wishes you can have each time. Or 5 of these as well if you can afford it. But I'd always recommend prioritizing the rainbow ones. You can get as many as you want from this page. There's no limit. Just however much you have of this. Something else you can get though from this page, so as you may have guessed, these are characters. Or if you don't have the character already, it would be, well, a new character for you. If you already have them, then it would be a constellation for them. Of course, there are a few other things you can get down here, but everything you see around here and below, you get from killing enemies in the world. It's probably best just to farm the enemies instead. Same applies to this page as well. The only thing worth getting from this page, apart from the fate, is probably this dust here. And that's because it lets you kind of swap certain materials over to something else. Hopefully that whole wishing explanation didn't get too complicated. The only other thing I'd say is don't wish on a banner that you don't actually care about the 5-star for, because I know some people tend to do that just because they like wishing, but then they come to regret it because they end up actually getting the 5-star. I'd recommend always just saving your wishes for when there's a character you want. Even if you want the 4-star characters, it's a bit risky to do, and you can get 4 stars way easier anyway. So I reckon the next section should be about things like how you get Primogems, for example. You know, the way you'd actually get those characters in the first place. So first of all, daily commissions, as mentioned. I think that would be 60 per day, so that means you can get a wish every 3 days just from that. Also many quests. If I went to one I haven't done, these are all world quests. They're not really as important as the main story, they're just little ones, I suppose you could say. But one like this gets me 40 Primogems. Also, as you may have guessed, exploration. So in every place in the map, if I zoom out, there's a exploration thing you see here. I mean, as you can probably tell, I've explored a bit, but there are chests in quite a lot of places. Searching things like that is what causes the exploration progress to go up. That and Animoculus in this area anyway. In fact, I can probably show this again on the other account. Right, I think this is amazing to show everything here. So first of all, especially in Mondstadt, there's a lot of these Celias you see here. Which are just these flying blue things. If you follow them, they tend to typically go to these statue things. I also already got one here earlier. Once you put them down, typically tend to get you chests. Open them, 5 primos, just like that. Also, I just got an achievement from that. Over here. Yep, there we go, there's another 10 primos. So, doing achievements also gets you that. There's a little challenge thing up here. Looks like it's a combat one. You can tell by the sword. I might have to quickly do a different team when I do this one. So there we go. Got a chest from that. I think that was a slightly worse chest, so yeah, 2 primos from that. So based on how good the chest is, you can get more Primogems as well. Right, I finally worked out where one of the Animoculus was. So, well, gonna have to just ignore all those enemies there. But as you can see on the mini-map, there's that star symbol. Those always show when you're near one of the Animoculi. And there it is, flying. So there's one collected. Now when you get those, there's these statues on the map. They're what you would have gone to open it up. Also, if you notice those little flying things, those are actually the crystal flies, as mentioned earlier. So that's how you get the crystal cores for the condensed resin. So if you go to a statue, I'm sure you would have already done this if you'd have reached this point. You then offer it. You might also notice it says stamina there. So this account already has the max stamina, but if you level up statues, it also gets you more stamina. I think when you start off it's only 100 or something, so yeah, it's quite the bump up. There are a few other things, and not even just getting Primogems, but just a way to get Fate instead. So unfortunately this will be in a different nation. So right now I'm at Fontaine. I'm trying to show as little as possible. So what you see here, the Fountain of Lucine. As you can see, there's actually a reward there. Unfortunately that's the blue Fate for the standard. But if I go on rewards, there should be a few, yeah, intertwined, which is the one you want the most. And the ways to get rewards from this, in this case, because this is the nation of Hydro, it's with Hydro sigils. The way you get those is from every chest. Some of the nations, especially the later ones, like Natlan, give you even better stuff. I think it's maybe 50 Primogems each level up with the sigils. What you're seeing right now is the teapot. You unlock it from a certain world quest in Leeway, I believe. I think it's around adventure rank 30. And if you do each of these ranks, you get Primogems as well. While you're in the teapot, you can also, when you have this realm currency, you can go into the realm depot here, get resin. It lasts maybe like 2 weeks or something at most. It's just 60 resin for free. And also up to 20 heroes wit, which is used to level up your character, along with like more stuff to level up your weapons, stuff for leveling up artifacts, that kind of thing. There's also a card game you can unlock. If I can get to it, there we go. Primogems, so that's another, what would that be, 600? Ultimately, all of these things are just one time for a few wishes in total, but if you really need the Primogems, all of that is there as well. There are also test runs, so it's only really for the 5-star characters, but for the featured ones from those wish banners shown earlier, there's a little thing where you can try them out in a bit of combat. There's also this, I suppose you could say, rhythm game. It's like Guitar Hero, that kind of thing. And, well, right now anyway, you can get 60 primos for doing some of the music stuff on that. Also, if I go to ones like this, go to reward preview, there's a bit of stuff you can do for exploring the newest stuff in the game, basically. Also, unfortunately, this is really bad if you're new. For the latest Arkham quests that come out, that is the main story, you get quite the bonus for doing them. Right now with the anniversary stuff, they've also got a few rewards going on here. Also, if you go to settings, account, redeem code, if there's any codes, you can also redeem them there. I think there are a few permanent ones that have always been around. I imagine if I can find them again, I'll put them somewhere. But typically speaking, when you put in codes nowadays, it's whenever there's a new version update, basically. There's usually 3 codes, and I can't remember the exact amount of primos, but it's a few hundred, I think, in total. So that's probably every 2 months, roughly speaking, assuming you're up to date with that. And then something that's actually an event, that is to say, like a proper event going on. Things like this. I haven't even tried it yet, not even on my main account, but doing that gives you a bit of stuff as well. Events like this, there's usually a few of them every update. However, do bear in mind that quite often the requirements are to do certain parts of quests. Now, the only other thing I can really think of to get primos, but it's from, I guess you could call it endgame content. So this is not something you'd typically really be able to do much if you're new. But for example, the Spiral Abyss, there's also the Imaginarium Theatre. The Stygian Onslaught came out fairly recently, and you can get a bit of Primogems. And this is something you can do in co-op, so you can actually just have someone carry you through all of the stuff that gives you Primos as a reward. But I think it's within the first 10 days of it resetting. So that is to say that all of these endgame things reset every now and then. For the Spiral Abyss, I think it's the middle of the month, about 15th or so. Imaginarium Theatre, it's the beginning of the month on the 1st. And Stygian Onslaught, I'm not actually too sure on. I think it might be based more on when the updates are out or something like that. Now, the reason why I say it'd be hard if you're new, it's just because your characters simply won't be strong enough for most of it. And also for the Spiral Abyss, for the early stages, it's only a one-time reward. The part that resets about this is the later stages, where you can consistently then get Primogems. But to put it into perspective, I believe for the Spiral Abyss and Imaginarium Theatre, if you're able to get all the Primogem rewards, it's roughly like, I think 600 from the Abyss, and maybe upwards of 1,000 from the Theatre. The Stygian Onslaught only probably has like 200 or so. But as you may have imagined, getting the Primogems, especially from the Theatre, is a lot harder. By the way, if you're struggling on combat specific stuff, I did also make a video in the past where I simply used just the very beginner characters, the ones that you'd get for free some way or another, without having to wish. And I'm pretty sure I did fight in the Spiral Abyss with those characters. Again, it might be slightly outdated. And on that note, I think that brings me to the final big topic of this guide, which is about getting characters stronger and just anything regarding that. So first of all, on the character page, there's 6 stars at the top here. That's how many ascensions the characters had. To put it simply, that's just based on what level they are. And that can only go up based on your adventure rank. So I think you can only do the first ascension when you start. These ascension talents I mentioned earlier, they're from getting a certain ascension on the character. I think it's the second and the fourth. So first of all, to get a character stronger, I feel like leveling them up is probably the most surefire way. And then of course the weapon would help a lot. All of them by default give you a bonus bit of attack. So this one specifically gives energy recharge. If I went down to one that I'm sure new players might have, any kind of 3-star one, this one gives a bit more attack as a bonus. This one gives crit damage. This one gives elemental mastery and so on. And then also a lot of these tend to have that description at the bottom, which then has its own little buff. And this tends to be the most unique part of each weapon. Because even if I looked at a weapon which has the exact same kind of stats at the top, such as Favonius Sword and Sacrificial Sword, both energy recharge, description is then a bit different. Because Favonius Sword means hitting a crit has a chance to get you more particles. I'll explain what that is in a bit. Whereas Sacrificial Sword lets you use the skill again instantly. Artifacts, as I'm sure I've already said, don't really have to worry about it when you're new. But if you want to base it off something, the best kind of things to go for, well, first of all, the flower and the feather, the main stats at the top here where it says attack and health, they don't change. It's only the sands, goblet and circlet which can have different main stats at the top. For a lot of characters, especially the ones that do your main source of damage, you tend to want maybe attack or sometimes energy recharge for the sands. Typically you want a bonus damage goblet in their element. So if I looked on someone else's, for example, animo damage bonus, that kind of thing. And then for the circlet, you tend to want crit, like this. And then the substats, which are the numbers you see below, is the same kind of stuff you're looking for. But of course, as you're new, even getting the main stats at the top are already hard enough. Let alone worrying about what set they are in, which is, for example here, Noblesse Oblige. I probably butchered that name, sorry about that. So as you can see, it says in brackets 4 there. That's how many artifacts out of the 5 that I have equipped are part of that set. So since I have at least 4 of these artifacts in that set, I have the full 4-piece set bonus. But of course, if you're new, I don't even know if I have them. Oh, I do. It's things like this. I mean, to be fair, the Exile is actually a pretty good one to have because of energy recharge. I mean, you get ones like this, attack % bonus. But the main idea is, don't worry too much about artifacts. And I mean, for example, let's say, because Traveler right now is anime, no point in putting this Pyro damage one on. That's going to do nothing. Don't just put random stuff on unless you really have nothing else. Like, I guess maybe the substats would help a tiny bit. May as well put it on someone who might actually benefit from it. Constellations, as I already said, it's when you get a copy of the same character, and basically they're just little buffs. I say little, they can be very good. And then talents, as I mentioned previously, can level them up with certain materials, but you can only level up talents so much based on the ascension of your character. For the record, 10 is the highest. Because they're in blue here, it can go up to 13, and that's because of the constellations here, where it says increase the level by 3. As I said at the beginning as well, with the training guide, that could be very helpful as well, to just be very clear on what's the worst about the characters. If you go to the character menu, you can also see it down here. Now, when I was saying about artifacts before, it can be slightly different to the main stats I mentioned on them. That could be based on the talents you have. So if we go to skill attributes here, all of these are based on attack. If we go to Barbara, she's a healer, so all of her skills are kind of to do with healing characters. If we look here, the amount of healing is actually based on her health. So you don't want attack on her, you just want health. Or likewise with Mizuki here, they have something that increases based on elemental mastery. Also, characters like this, at first it says attack %, so you'd be thinking, oh, just do attack. However, sometimes if you look at Ascension talents, having a certain amount of energy recharge buffs everything. So if you ever want to decide on artifacts, also take that stuff into consideration. Alternatively, you just go down to fast equip here, and it probably picks a decent group of artifacts for you. You can also go down to the filter here, and the ones at the top typically tend to be the recommended sets, along with, if you click up here, just every kind of recommendation of the stats on those artifacts. Now, the final thing here is kind of just making sense of this, which you see by clicking details there. So I think health, attack and defense probably already make enough sense. Elemental mastery, as I was saying before about each character having a different element, most elements can combine to cause a reaction of sorts. Pyro So fire and hydro, water. If they combine, that would be like a vaporize. Off the top of my head, I think that means it does like double damage to normal or something like that. And elemental mastery simply means that damage buff is higher. I think something that can make it very clear is the burning reaction, which is between Dendro, the grass one, and Pyro, because when you combine those, you see this constant Pyro damage on the enemy. If the elemental mastery goes up, that number is consistently a lot higher. Crit, basically 40% chance of hitting a crit with these attacks, and then it's an 87% bonus damage when it's a crit. That's how to explain it with those numbers. Healing bonus, as I was saying before, there are some characters who can heal. If they have the healing bonus, maybe it be from a certain artifact, means they heal more for the characters. Incoming healing bonus means the character gets healed more. But energy recharge, now as you may have noticed, the burst, which is kind of like your ultimate of a character, has this charge up that's needed. Charges up through getting particles, which are typically done by hitting enemies with your elemental skills, or maybe even just killing them. So simply put, energy recharge makes getting a burst back quicker for each particle you get. CD reduction, cooldown reduction. I can't think of what would actually do that, but that would just mean you can do your skill and burst more often. Shield strength, there's some characters that can put up a shield, just means shield stronger. I think these ones are then quite obvious. Pyro damage bonus, it means the character's doing more damage with that element. Pyro res, resistance, means your character takes less of that damage. Hopefully that all makes sense. So I think the final thing about getting your character stronger is probably just about the team you're using. So what I have here, I mean it could probably do quite well, but it's not ideal. In most teams I would say you tend to want a DPS, 2 supports and a healer or shielder, that kind of thing. So from what I remember, on that beginner wish banner I mentioned, where it goes away after 20 wishes, I think getting the well is a guarantee. She actually shields and heals, I'm pretty sure, and also kind of works as a main DPS, so she's probably not that bad. The only downside is the fact she's Geo, and that's just because Geo reacting with anything doesn't really do all that much. And to be honest, I think if any of you want a more in-depth explanation of that kind of stuff, literally just watch that other video, because every character featured in that one is one you can get for free. So unlike artifacts, there's nothing that really tells you what the best weapons to use are, but of course there's only so many weapons you have to choose from if you are completely new. But despite that, let's go through some of them. So first of all, as I was going through on the wishing section earlier, there are weapons you can get at 5-star, and then of course more commonly 4-star, and well, even more commonly 3-star. And these 3-star weapons are the majority of what you get each time you wish on this game. But that being said, I feel like instead of saying, oh, this one's better to use than this or something like that, it's probably better for me to just say what kind of main stats to look for, so that even if you had a 4-star weapon, be a bit more easy to pick from. Also, despite what I just gave as an example, if anything, this one might actually be better for Traveller specifically. So as I was already saying with weapons, base attack is the same across all of them. The only thing that makes them different is then the description and also the other stat at the top here where it says crit damage, for example. So it does completely depend on what character you're using. Of course, a weapon like this, where it's attack percent, as you can probably guess, it's literally any character deals damage, I suppose. And then after that, you can start considering the description. So as it says here, with increased damage against opponents affected by Hydro or Cryo, well, in the current team I'm using, Kaya is actually a Cryo character. So in this situation, this weapon might actually be best on him. Things like crit damage, and crit rate for that matter, that's just good on any other DPS character yet again. And I mean, when it says health being above 90%, you might also want to take that into consideration. So this weapon tends to be better if you have something like a healer in your party, so that you can keep your health high. There's a few other 3-star weapons like this that give you energy recharge. Description here says that using a burst increases your attack and movement speed. So that's probably best for a DPS kind of character, and even more so for one that you want to use the burst on often, especially because you get energy recharge at the top. So of course there are some weapons that are good for literally any character, but just bear in mind that when you're looking through weapons you might have, you can work it out just by thinking of what you want to use the character for. Ones like this as well, Elemental Mastery, but down here it says about Overload. That's Electro and Pyro, Superconduct, Electro and Cryo, Electrocharged, Electro and Hydro, Quicken, Electrodendro, and so on. It's all to do with electro reactions, basically. So you want to use a character that wants Elemental Mastery, and ideally some kind of electro element. By the way, this sword, very specifically, you can only get a few of them ever. It's for the same reason that I'd never recommend binning them, because you can use weapons as a form of resource for leveling them up. I wouldn't recommend ever wasting these. I think they're locked by default anyway, which means it won't happen accidentally. I can only really remember one way to get one of them, and that's if you're over in Leeway. So I've just gone to this waypoint over by the crafting table. The reason why I'm hiding the map and everything is just because I want to keep it a bit more spoiler free, of course. If you go down here, got this person here. Talk to him. The dialogue won't pop up for me now, but one of those dialogues, if you can't work it out, I guess just brute force it, go through every dialogue. One of those options should get you a sword from him. Again, sorry, I can't remember the other specific ways, but to be honest, there's only a couple of characters that could even benefit from using that sword. Because as you can see, I only have one of them properly leveled up, and it's used on Kuki, who benefits from Elemental Mastery and is an Electro user. So I guess the general idea of these is, for example, this sword here, defense. You're not going to want this on your Traveller, for example, because they don't want defense. So it's just things like that. And then, of course, the stats get even more diverse with the higher rarity weapons, like 4 stars. As I think I showed earlier, Sacrificial Sword and Favonius both give energy recharge, but different description. And these two are what you get from Wishing. Just these two overall tend to be good on basically any character. So if you have them, I'd definitely recommend using them. And there's just one other thing regarding weapons, which I think is quite important. Just as a warning though, I think this is probably the most spoilery part of this entire video. And that's just because some weapons you can actually get for free. So some of them have actually been from certain events. I don't think at any point in this video I really thought to bring that up, but a sword like this, if I'm not mistaken, was from doing an event. And then there's also ones like this, I believe are actually from doing a certain quest. Just like a world quest or something. And then there are quite a few other weapons through forging. So this one, for example. So if we talk to Wagner here, I'd like something made. Yeah, as you can see, there's quite a few weapons here. Now, do bear in mind that if you talk to the blacksmith, you won't see all of this. This is only because I have all the blueprints. So basically, if we look at this, for example, this is a forgeable from Sumeru. This is from Fontaine, this is from Natlan. It's that kind of thing. I'm pretty sure this is only for Sumeru, but the blueprints there aren't from talking to Blacksmith, and it's from instead a really big world quest. You'll know it when you get it. But typically, a weapon like this is from the Fontaine Blacksmith. Like to buy a weapon, forging diagram, and there's all of them. Sorry, I just realised I said blueprints. Yeah, I guess they're called diagrams. As you can see, they cost 10 of a certain material. If you have them, you can then get diagram, let you forge as many as you want. Although, of course, it then costs some stuff as well. Now, I believe I already talked about weekly bosses very briefly at one point. And other than their materials being used for the higher talent levels, they also get you stuff like this. Billets, whatever it's called. And those are what are used to craft the weapons. There's also a few weapons, and when I say a few, I quite literally only mean... Actually, yeah, exactly 3. They're from doing something that you unlock a bit later on. I think it's like Adventure Rank 30. It's from fishing. This is one of them. I'm not going to bother trying to pronounce that, but it's like a pipe. There's also this one, which is like a... well, a fish. This is the other one, which I actually use on one of my strongest characters. That's just how good this weapon is. And I think they're actually all energy recharge related. So right now I'm at Inazuma. This is the fishing person you talk to. And here you can see it literally has the weapon available. And basically you just have to catch fish. And then you can go here for the refinements, which if I didn't explain before, if you have copies of a weapon, you can combine them to increase the refinement rank. Which if you can see, it basically changes those blue numbers, with rank 5 being the highest you can get. There's only one other thing to really talk about that I kind of already did at the same time, and that's just again with events and everything. So like I said, a bunch of stuff like this tend to appear every update. But if I were to say about specific events that happen every year and that I'd recommend trying to play during, first of all, well, the anniversary. You get a free 5-star character. I think that's a pretty big deal. So that's 20 wishes right there. So definitely the anniversary, which is basically every time a new nation comes out, around September time. And then there's a few other big events that tend to happen. One of them being Lantern Rite. So this is January time. I think it's like Chinese New Year or something. And every time that's come out, there's been this new 4-star from Leeway. And also if you take part in the event, you can pick a 4-star from Leeway to keep for free, including the new one that comes out each time. And bear in mind that 2 of the best 4-stars in the game, Zhangling and Jingcho, are available. There's also an outfit for free each Lantern Rite, I'm pretty sure. Last year it was actually this for Zhangling. During that time there's also an outfit for a 5-star character. However, that one actually costs money. But for the 4-star ones, they're always free if you get them during the event. And then they cost money if you didn't get them at the time. There's also a few other events just around the year where there is a free 4-star for you to get. I'm not sure if there's a specific time period, but I know there have been quite a few characters in the past. There's one other really big event off the top of my head, and that's basically at the other time of the year, around summer, and it's the update just before the anniversary one, to put it simply. And that one also tends to have a brand new skin for a character that you can get for free. And also bear in mind, all of the events I just mentioned can give you a lot of Primogems. And with all of that being said, I think that's just the main stuff about Genshin. To give a general summary of everything I've mentioned, do your dailies to get a bit of Primogems consistently. Spend resin in order to get your stuff stronger. Doing both each day can work towards that thing of getting these rewards. If you ever struggling with stuff, you can typically use co-op as a means of help. So that's something I didn't really mention previously, as people would probably just be happy to join you to help and stuff. If there's ever something that's really too tough, unless it is like Spiral Abyss or something which you can't do in co-op, then there is that available to do. When you're completely lost on what to do when it comes to getting the character stronger, you can go to the training guide. Boom. If you're not sure what to do quest-wise, open the handbook. There you go. To get more Primogems, you also just want to be doing as much exploration as you can. Again, keeping up to date with those events, with the big events being Lantern Rite, the anniversary, and just in the summer. If there's something I didn't quite explain right, or there's something I kind of forgot about, or just anything any of you are confused by, do let me know in the comments. Try my best to answer it. If after seeing the previous guides I've made for Genshin Impact, you might also want to see the updated versions of those, maybe that's something I could also do. And of course, if there's a guide that I haven't actually thought of doing that any of you think would maybe be good, do let me know. I think that's about it. I'll see you all in the next one.